Welcome to Building the Future, hosted by Kevin Horick. With millions of listeners a month, Building the Future has quickly become one of the fastest rising programs, with a focus on interviewing startups, entrepreneurs, investors, CEOs, and more. The radio and TV show airs in 15 markets across the globe, including Silicon Valley. For full showtimes, past episodes, or to sponsor the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com.
Welcome back to the show. Today we have Jesse Schell. He's the CEO at Schell Games, and he's a professor of entertainment technology at Carnegie Mellon University. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I think what you guys are doing at Schell Games is actually very innovative and cool, and you've also had some other really cool jobs before Schell Games. But maybe before we get into all that, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Oh, sure. Yeah, let's see. When I was younger, I guess till I was about 14, I lived in Morris County in northern New Jersey, and then moved to western Massachusetts for high school.
Okay, interesting.
And both interesting places to be.
So you went to university. What did you take and why?
Well, let's see. First, I went to Rensselaer, where I studied computer science.
Okay.
And I focused on that because it seemed like best bet for me for a career. Through my teenage years, I was really focused on two things. One of them was video game programming, and the other one was juggling and circus arts.
Interesting.
And yep. So I worked in a few different circus troupes, and I used to work at the park that's now Six Flags New England, doing all kinds of shows. But when it came down to it, I said, you know what? If I really want a job with 3 meals a day, I should probably follow the computer science path. I didn't really follow the video games at first, because at the time, it just didn't seem realistic. I didn't know anybody or know anybody who knew anybody who was in that business or that space. So I was just really focused on more traditional computer science. So that was where I first went. So I went to Rensselaer in New York State for undergraduate. And then I ended up going to graduate school at Carnegie Mellon after I'd gotten a job with Bell Communications Research, and they sent me to grad school. And that was where I first started working on virtual reality in the early 90s. And
Wow,
so that really made a big change in my life.
You were like very early on in VR then.
Oh yeah. No, I've been at VR not since it was brand new. I mean, it was brand new in 1968, but
Sure.
Since it really was kind of available, I've been at it pretty solidly since then, because I went from Carnegie Mellon to I was back at Bell Communications, but shortly after that was when I got a position at the Disney Company, working at the VR studio in the mid 90s. And that was when that was when video games and VR came together as a career for me.
Very cool. So walk us through what you did at Disney, because I think in a lot of cases, like in some cases, like that's a lot of people's like dream job, right?
Yeah. It certainly it certainly was a dream job for me. I'd grown up around amusement parks, and I'd been working in them, doing shows, so it was something like I knew a lot about. But the idea of like being able to help create the Disney parks, that was something I never even imagined could be possible.
Sure.
It's kind of funny because for me, when I was growing up, I didn't really have a very good view of the Disney parks. It was never something I visited. My family wasn't especially wealthy growing up, and so it wasn't a thing we ever did. The only thing I really knew about them was I'd see parades on TV, and I'm like, these look really corny. I just kind of had the impression that there wasn't much to it, that it was just going to be really corporate and not very innovative. And when my wife and I got married in 95, she said, why don't we go to Disney World for our honeymoon? And I was like, I wasn't especially into it, but she was into it. So I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So we'll set that up. So I went down there, and it was really life-changing for me because I had no concept of the level of quality that was brought to theme park attractions down there.
Yeah.
And that was hugely inspirational to me. And one of the things that we saw on that trip was Disney's first virtual reality installation, which was this really small thing, kind of in a hidden corner of inventions at Epcot Center. And I was like, oh my God, Disney's doing VR, and it was the best VR I'd ever seen. And
Interesting.
I immediately started asking people there, about it. Like, are you guys hiring people? Because I'd been doing VR in grad school, And they were like, no, we're not really hiring. But then I kind of kept an eye on things online in the, way back then. And I happened to see they had a job posting for their studio in California. And so I applied to it. And it's funny because what they were looking for was somebody who knew how to do AI programming. And that was the focus of my undergraduate work. Somebody who had experience with virtual reality. That was the focus of my graduate work, and someone who knew how to put a show together. And of course, I'd been doing all the circus work. So,
wow, it was the perfect fit.
It worked out really well. Yeah, I know. It felt perfect to me. And so, I went and got the job, and it was very exciting. We were doing a lot of inventing. We built this thing called Disney Quest, which was sort of Disney's virtual reality theme park. And later built a game called Toontown Online, which was Disney's first massively multiplayer game for kids.
Sure, I remember that. That's wild. I remember playing that.
Oh, all right. Yeah, I was lead designer on that.
That's very cool, man. I love, I've had the opportunity through the show a few times now to talk to people like yourself, where I played their stuff as a kid or or recently or something like that. It's always been really cool when you get to meet somebody that you've actually worked or played with their stuff, right? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's fun.
So walk me through, you left Disney, obviously you're the CEO of Schell Games. So how did that come to be, and what do you guys do at Schell Games?
Yeah. So my wife and I, we both grew up East Coast. We actually met in high school when I moved to Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And moved to California for the Disney job. And so we were living in LA for about 7 years. And during that time, we had a daughter. Okay. And we started looking at each other and thinking, wow, is her hometown really going to be Burbank? Is this really how we're going to do it? Because, we didn't have any family on West Coast. And LA is just really different compared to living in the Northeast, right? Things like weather and seasons and all that sort of thing. And we started thinking about, actually what really turned it for us was 9/11.
Okay.
So 9/11 happens.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to go in, let's see, I'm trying to do the math here. In October, I'm supposed to go and be the best man at my best friend's wedding growing up. And he still lives back in New Jersey. And at the time, the government is saying, you know what, if you can not get in an airplane, we would appreciate it. So please avoid air travel at all costs. And so we said, well, we've always wanted to drive across the country. Why not do it with a 10-month-old in the car? This is a great idea. So we ended up driving across the country. And about halfway through the trip, my wife, she says, are you thinking what I'm thinking? And I said, are you thinking that every place that we see is looking nicer than where we live right now? And she said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And I said, yeah, I was thinking that too. So over the course of the trip, we started talking about, if we were going to move, where would we move? What would I do? How would that work? And I happened to know this guy, Randy Pausch, who, if you've ever heard of The Last Lecture, which was kind of a thing several years back, that was Randy. So Randy was professor at Carnegie Mellon, and he wasn't there when I was a student, but he started this thing called the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon. And but before that, he had been a professor at another college and ended up doing a sabbatical at Disney. And when he did the sabbatical, he ended up with a desk right next to me, and I was kind of put in charge of keeping him out of trouble. Because his whole idea was he'd seen that same Aladdin VR exhibit at Epcot that I saw, and he felt the same way I did. He was staring at it. He was doing VR at the PhD level, and he's like, how is it that this looks better than anything that's happening in the best research academia? And he wanted to find out what it was. So he ended up doing a sabbatical at the VR studio at Disney. Wow. And we became really good friends as part of that. And so then later he goes and starts the Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon. And when I was thinking about, well, where could I work on the East Coast? I called him up and said, hey, I know you've got that ETC going there. Do you need anybody to teach game design or something like that? And he said, yeah, actually we do. And so we tried that out. So I actually ended up moving out to Pittsburgh to teach at Carnegie Mellon and starting up Schell Games on the side.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. So what made you actually decide to start up Schell Games?
Yeah, so after teaching for a couple years, initially I started Schell Games just as independent consulting for me, because going from kind of Disney executive to assistant professor working 9 months a year at a college was a big salary hit.
Sure,
and
I
so
can
there
imagine.
was a little bit of like, okay, I better fill this, better see if I can augment the salary a little bit. So I started doing some just consulting on the side, and I needed to get a little entity together for the purposes of doing the consulting.
Right.
And so initially that's what Schell Games was. It was just me doing consulting on various game design things. And after doing that for a couple of years, two things happened. First of all, I started realizing the realities of teaching. And because what happens with teaching, these new students come in and they're super green and they make all these dumb mistakes. And you say, no, not like that, like this. And after a couple of years, they get really good. And you say, wow, this is really great. I love working with you. And then they're like, okay, I'm graduating, bye. And then new people come in and they make all the same mistakes again. And I realized, oh my God, is this going to be my whole career? Just watching people make the same mistakes over and over. And I thought, I wish there was a way I could do the teaching and kind of work with people who were kind of new, but also find a way to keep working with people. And right around that same time, some of the clients I've been working with were saying, hey, I appreciate your consulting, but if you could pull a little team together, we could throw you some development projects if that's interesting to you. And of course, that all came together for me because I thought, hey, I could reach out to some of the people who graduated and kind of say, hey, would you like to join this entity? And I could keep working with them. And so I tried that, and it worked. We got 4 or 5 people together, started doing some of these projects, and it was super fun. And that was really how Schell Games really got started.
Very cool. And you guys have built some really well-known, popular games. Do you want to talk about some of those?
Yeah, sure. Now, the funny part is there are some things I can't talk about. We've worked on.
That's fine.
Like some of the theme park projects and things that we've worked on are very well known, but like for contractual reasons, so like
Sure.
we're not supposed to talk about them.
Sure. That's fair.
But some of the things that anybody who knows the VR space has likely seen some of our titles. So, for example, our best known one is a VR game called I Expect You to Die, which is basically a series of secret agent themed escape rooms. That's a lot of fun. We've also done a sword fighting, a VR game called Until You Fall, that's been very popular. And of course, going back in time, we've worked on all kinds of things. Because Schell Games now, I think we're 18 years in on my company.
Wow.
So, and it's been a huge variety of things. Everything from interactive projects for SeaWorld and for Disney to we've even done some preschool stuff. Anyone with really little kids is probably aware of the Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood show.
Yeah.
And we've done, I don't know, 15, 20 games based on Daniel Tiger.
Sure.
So we've done those things. I mean, we've done dozens and dozens of games. Everything from mobile to VR and PC games. Like it's a lot of stuff. Lot of variety. We've done a lot of Star Wars things. We did if anybody saw the Jedi Challenges augmented reality lightsaber game,
Sure.
We created that.
That's
Another
cool.
VR one was the Star Wars Droid Repair VR game, and that was a really fun one too. So it's a big variety, a lot of different things.
No, that's really cool. It's funny because when I first found out about you guys and I was looking in, it's like it's funny because you're like, oh, my kids have played that, and my kids have played that. It's just like it's pretty cool, right? Like to see that stuff, yeah, and especially the Daniel Tiger stuff. Like my kids are 3 and 5, so yeah, they're and then like my
Oh, all
sister
right.
kids too. So it's like it's just funny how like even just in my immediate family they've played like a bunch of this stuff, and then like I get to talk to you like a few months later, right? It's pretty cool. Um,
You know, what's really funny with the pandemic, video game sales have generally gone up, but we had one game that really shot up in sales,
okay.
and that was our Daniel Tiger's Stop and Go Potty. The
Yep.
potty training game.
Yep.
The sales on that just started doubling day for day, and so that was kind of interesting to see. I think suddenly that became a more urgent problem for some people.
Yeah, fair enough. That's cool, man. So, walk us through some of the other services that you guys provide at Schell Games.
Well, the way our company is set up, different companies set up differently, especially game studios. Some game studios work primarily off of publisher deals,
Okay.
so they're really in with Activision or EA or one of those. Others, they have kind of an investor basis,
Right.
and so you've got investors behind them. We don't have either of those. What we tend to do is work for hire projects.
Okay.
So somebody will hire us to make this game or that game. We try and make those projects profitable, and then we try and take the profits and invest them in our own stuff. So we have a lot of variety in the types of things that we do. And since we kind of have a specialty in working on unusual things, it's all over the place. Sometimes people come to us and say, hey, we've got a brand new technology. Can you help us make something for it? So like Magic Leap augmented reality headsets, they came to us and said, hey, we want to make a Star Wars thing. Can you help us? So we made this game all about the porgs. It's kind of like a pet game where you actually get to pet the porgs as they kind of jump around on your couch. We have other ones that, it's all over the place, because sometimes you have these theme park stuff, because you've probably seen it at theme parks more and more. They're kind of getting interactive and having digital aspects to what they're doing.
Totally.
So we've been doing a lot of that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So there's a huge variety, and then we do a lot of health games. Is a big thing for us. We really have 4 areas of business. Theme parks and museums, health games, education games, and then just straight up games for home entertainment. And so we're usually doing about 8 games at a time, and it's usually a blend of a variety of those.
Interesting. No, that's really cool. So you guys are working on a new educational history VR game. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. One of the new ones we're doing, it's History Maker VR. We'd done some educational VR stuff before. We'd made a chemistry lab game called HoloLab Champions,
Okay.
which is kind of like, it's weird. It's like a chemistry lab game show, which is kind of funny.
Interesting.
But we were thinking about what are different topics that you could hit with VR. And everybody always talks about, oh, I'd love to do history. We're gonna take you back to ancient Rome and all of that. And you say, well, that sounds cool, but then you're like, really? I got to build all of ancient Rome, and then what am I actually doing there? It gets really expensive. So we started thinking about what are more economical things that would have a little more longevity. And we realized one of the things you can do with VR is use it to capture the motion of the player, because you're tracking the hands, you're tracking the head. And we started thinking about how one thing that is so important, for students, so culturally relevant, is the ability to create good videos. Between YouTube and TikTok and everything else, creating videos is a really important part of literacy today. It's just part of how we communicate and how we communicate well. And so we had this idea, we're like, what if we made a VR game where you get to be these different historical figures?
That's cool.
And we're like, well, but what would you do? Like, what would I actually have to go through the day? We're like, yeah, that'd be really expensive. But what if we made a thing where you get to be these historical figures and we're going to put you in a TV studio? So we set it up so you get to pick who you're going to be. You want to be, Harriet Tubman. You want to be Abraham Lincoln. You can kind of become this person, and now you're in their body. And there's a microphone on the headset, so every time you talk, like the mouth on the character moves.
That's cool.
And we basically put you in a TV studio, and we give you the opportunity, if you wrote a little speech or something, it appears on the teleprompter. And now you have the ability to kind of basically act out a speech by this person and get it recorded and then pop it out as a video, so you can kind of put that up on YouTube or whatever. So it's partly designed to be used like in a history class, so that you can like literally step into the shoes of this person and kind of do a performance as that person. So on one level, it's kind of a simple idea, but on another level, like people talk about trying to understand these historical figures. And like, when you actually look down and like, their skin is your skin. And it's a very special and unique feeling.
No, that's really cool. When does that come out?
I think we're dropping that in August. I'm pretty sure is when that is going to come out.
Okay.
It'll be available on Steam. Yep.
Very cool. So you also wrote The Art of Game Design, and it's like a very well-known game design book. Do you maybe want to talk about the book and all the other, because you guys have broken that out into kind of a bunch of other products with a deck and an app and whatnot. Do you want to talk about that? Because I think, at least from my experience and kind of going through the book myself, there's a lot of really good advice, especially if you want to get into the game VR, AR space.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Art of Game Design is now in the 3rd edition. The 1st edition came out way back in 2008 now, I guess. So the book was based on the class I started teaching at Carnegie Mellon. And I've always been interested in thinking about game design and entertainment. Even back in my Disney days, I was always interested in the theory of like, what is it that people actually find engaging and people actually find entertaining? And the way the book came about is funny. I was at a conference giving a talk, and this book publisher was there, and he said, hey, I hear you do a lot of work with the Panda engine, Panda was just like a game engine that actually came out of Disney. And I said, yeah, I do a lot of work on that. And he says, would you like to write a book about it? We have some interest in the Panda engine. And I said, wow, no, I sure don't. But I'll tell you, I do have a book I've wanted to write all about like the psychology of entertainment. And he kind of shook his head. He's like, yeah, no one cares about that. But if you could kind of make it about the psychology of game design, there's a market for that. And I thought, well, I'm teaching the class in game design and I'm using all my psychology of entertainment stuff in the game design class. Sure, why don't I give it a shot? And it took me a long time. It took me about 5 years to kind of get it all together. It wasn't easy or obvious because at the time, mid-2000s, there weren't a lot of game design books. People were playing games like crazy, but there were just a handful of game design books, and some were good, and most of them were not so good. And I started talking to really senior game designers, real experts in the industry. And I said, yeah, I'm thinking of writing a book about game design. And some of them would shake their head and say, no, you can't. You can't actually write a good book about game design. And I said, why? Why not? And they said, because different games are different. And any advice you give that you think is right for one game, it's going to be wrong for another game. So you're going to find yourself saying stuff, and it's just right for some games and wrong for other games.
Interesting.
And I thought, yeah, that is kind of right. And then I started thinking about, well, what can I say that wouldn't be wrong? And I had this big insight, which is that questions are never wrong. And I was thinking about that and thinking about how, yeah, the way we make good games is we ask ourselves a lot of questions all the time.
Okay.
And once I realized that, I thought, oh, what if I could make a book all about these are the questions to ask yourself? Because the question might be not relevant, but it will never be wrong. And that ended up being the framework of the book. So the subtitle, it's The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses. And the idea is each of the lenses in the book is really just a little set of questions to ask yourself on different topics. There's like lens of emotion with questions about the emotional parts of your game, and lens of character, things about the characters in your game. And there's about, I think it's now 100 and probably about 116 lenses are in the third edition of the book. And the book's done really well. It's been very popular. And I think part of that is I tried to make it very accessible. I kept thinking of myself in high school trying to figure out like what made for good games. And I kept thinking, well, what would I have wanted to hear? What would have helped me then? So I really tried to make it something people could explore on their own, and that was both complete but also as accessible as possible.
No, that's very cool. So you also have something called the deck of lenses, and then like a digital version of that. Do you want to talk about that, and how are they similar and different from the actual book?
Yeah, sure. So after I'd got the book together, I realized, I found myself like, I couldn't remember all the lenses just off the top of my head. There's 100 plus. And
sure.
So I started thinking, I wish I had kind of a deck of cards where I could kind of pull these out. And I thought, yeah, we should make that. So we made a deck of cards where each card has like a little illustration that goes with it, and then the questions that you might ask yourself. And it's really useful just for kind of for quick reference, but also we use it for a creativity tool all the time. You're stuck on something. Maybe it's like, oh, this section is boring and I don't know why. Or, no, this game's missing something. I don't know what it is. We'll often just take the deck out, deal everybody a few cards. Everybody kind of flips through the cards they have. And it's like, okay, talk about the cards you've got. And is anything relevant? And very often it really sparks ideas that you wouldn't have thought of just on your own. So the physical deck is nice. And you can, that's available on Amazon. But also we thought, for convenience, let's make an app. So that we made a free app for iOS and Android that does a lot of the same function. It has basically a digital deck of cards, and you can kind of use it for the same kind of, as a creativity tool, the same way.
Sure. And then you also have a version online that people just play with it in their browser, correct?
Yeah. Yes. Actually, I have to double check that, because that I can't remember if we released that or not. If we released it, it's out. If not, it's coming out soon.
No, I'm like actually like I have it up right now. It's actually really cool. Like,
okay, good.
I've been playing with the Android and iOS versions, but there's also a web version too that people can play with. The thing that's interesting, because
I couldn't remember if we released it. I'm glad we did.
No, it's cool, man. The thing that's interesting to me about what you guys are doing is I've seen in like kind of the user experience design side of kind of software, there's been these different kind of sets of UX cards or whatever. There's a bunch of names for them, but it's interesting to see like a game design one, because I think even a lot of the stuff can be applied to any vertical of design, right? Sure. Obviously it's, you guys are building this like for game design, but when I was looking through this stuff, I was like, wow, that really gives me a different view on building kind of software or a startup or that kind of thing, right? So I think, sure, they're tailored to game design, but I think anybody that is in the design space, or whether they're actually doing the visual part or thinking about the people using the thing or just trying to solve some problems, could get a lot of valuable insight from just kind of checking out what you guys are doing on your deck of cards.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the reason for that is, I mean, design is design is design. Like, if, just the stuff in my book, where did I learn these lessons? I learned them from game designers. Yeah, some of them.
Sure.
But I also pulled stuff I learned from architects, from musicians, from novelists, from actors. There's architects. There's so many different places that you can kind of pull wisdom from, because it's all what it is. All is in the end is it's all human experience.
Sure.
And that's definitely part of the secret of it. You can learn how to create great things from so many different dimensions. And the funny thing about games is, I sometimes talk about games as being the art form that subsumes all the others. because, you can't really put a game into a song or a game into a movie, but you can put everything into a game. I can have songs, movies, plays, novels. I can have all of that in a game. Games just kind of subsume everything, because all a game is just like an interactive experience that you do. And so the things that make for good games, they make for good everything. So yeah, there's definitely a lot that can transfer.
Interesting. So you've obviously mentioned it throughout the show that you've been in the VR space for a number of years.
Yeah.
Like, it seemed like VR was really, really hot a couple of years ago. And I'm not saying it's not hot now, but like, where is the state of kind of VR and AR? Because I think Google's doing a bunch of stuff, Apple's doing a bunch of stuff. Obviously, some of the bigger names in the gaming space are also doing some stuff in those spaces. But where is the state of kind of VR and AR right now?
Yeah. So it's a little complicated, because different people mean different things when they say VR and AR. Especially AR is a really confusing term, because some people say AR and they mean you put on these glasses and you're looking at the world and the world is overlaid in your glasses. And other people mean, oh no, it's like Pokemon Go on my phone. That's AR.
Right.
So that AR is kind of all over the place in terms of what it actually means. VR is a lot more focused. It's, you put on this headset and you're looking at a virtual world that's not actually there. So right now, VR is way ahead of AR, because VR is just so much easier. Because VR, all I have to do is make this artificial world and put your body into it. Okay. With AR, like the phrase we often use with AR is, augmented reality is better when it actually augments reality.
Interesting.
A lot of AR doesn't, right?
Sure.
A lot of AR is just like, oh, we're going to float this thing in vague space in front of you. Well, why? What does that get me? Why wouldn't I just interact with it on a screen? When AR is powerful, it actually interacts with the space around you in a way that's relevant to people. And that's way harder, because it means that the computer actually has to scan and understand the space that you're in. So technologically, it's a lot more difficult. But for VR right now, there's been a lot of excitement, because we've kind of crossed this threshold where suddenly there are good headsets that are powerful and they work. The problem we've had for the last few years is they're really expensive. You can get the Vive or the Oculus Rift, and first you got to buy $1,000 computer at least, and then you have to buy like a $600 or $800 headset, and that's pricing that's just way out of reach for most people.
Sure.
But the corner's been turned. Like, Oculus now has the Quest system out, and that thing's $399, and you don't need a computer, and you don't have any wires. You just put this thing on and you go. And they keep selling out. It's just constantly selling out. They can't make them fast enough.
Interesting.
And the people who have them are buying games like crazy. For every one game that we sell on PC, we sell about 10 on the Oculus Quest.
Wow.
It's clear
Interesting.
It's clear that this is the path forward on VR. Particularly if they start to get competitors, particularly if the price comes down a little more. Like, it's really, that's what VR is going to look like over the next, 4 or 5 years, is going to be this, this headset that you just put on and go. So, I've always loved VR because it's special. The people always talk about VR like it's like, oh, it's like 3D glasses, like it's some technology for your eyes, but it's not. The difference with VR is VR lets you put your body into a computer simulation. And the VR experiences that work the best are the ones that actually involve your body. So, for example, we've been working on Until You Fall, which is a sword fighting game. And it's exhausting because you have to like swing swords all over the place. You're like constantly, swinging and blocking and moving and ducking and all of that. But you're doing it with your real body. And there's something about having your real body in a space that it's just a powerful experience you can't get any other way. One thing I think about a lot is the question of how we decide what's real. Nobody is ever watching television and says, "Oh my God, wait, I thought that was real for a second." Nobody ever thinks that. You know that what you're watching on TV or on a movie screen, you know it's fake, right? It might be weird or disturbing or whatever, but you're never worried that it's in the room with you, right? It's just not how it is.
Sure.
But a thing that happens in VR a lot, like we'll be doing a puzzle game and maybe there's like a virtual table next to you in VR, and people will be like working on the puzzle, and then they stop and they think, and then they will actually go to lean on the virtual table, and then they'll like, whoa, that's not there. Whoops, right? And of course, intellectually, they never thought the table was real. But something inside them, the part of their body that decides how the world works and how space works, actually believed that the table is real enough that their arm reached out to lean on it. And that's what VR does. It creates this deeper engagement with the simulation that you just can't get any other way. And so I just love it as a medium for that reason, because it's just so rich and interesting.
No, that's actually really quite fascinating. You're right. Like it's probably one of the most amusing things to do is watch somebody with a VR headset on. And I find like children are hilarious with it, right? Like it's right. Yeah. Or, well, I should say people of all ages, but I find like I've given my kids a VR headset and just like watch them play with it. It's actually really quite fascinating. And like, sure, they're having like the greatest time, right? But you're right. Like people actually think certain things are happening, or something happens and they like pull off the headset because like they get freaked out, or it's quite interesting. Yeah, no,
it definitely it can definitely be too much, right? And the funny thing about VR is the stronger your imagination, the stronger the experience is, and that's why it's so strong for children, because children have super strong imaginations. You know, not like adults who tend to have kind of withered, dead imaginations, but it's really powerful. And AR has some of the same potential, but the problem is you have to create the illusion, because AR has a harder problem, because VR has to just create the illusion that your body is in this world that's not there.
Right.
That's what VR has to do. What AR has to do is it has to convince you that objects from the simulation are in the real world room with you. And that's a lot harder to pull off. But people are working on it and making progress, but it is tougher.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So where do you see kind of VR going? Like, it sounds like it's been growing like crazy, and it's obviously the barrier to entry is getting a lot cheaper, but like, where do you see VR and even AR kind of going in the future? Do you think all games are going to move to that? Or are we still going to kind of play the traditional games with keyboard and mouse, or like a gamepad, or what do you think the future of gaming is going to be?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Everybody tends to think, a new technology is coming out, it's going to take over everything. And that's almost never how it happens.
Right.
Kind of like, I remember when iPad came out, people were like, oh, we'll never have laptops again. We won't need them. We'll just all have an iPad. And, it turns out no. People now have both. There's iPads for some things and laptops for other things.
Sure.
And, same thing, mobile games came out. Oh, we won't need to do, we won't need to do PC games anymore. It's like, no, that's not right. We'll just have a different kind of diversity of gaming. And so my prediction is I think VR is going to be a healthy chunk of the game industry. My guess is it is going to, like, I've been saying stuff like by 2025, I don't know, it's somewhere between 10% and maybe a quarter at most of the game industry, which isn't totally taking over, but it's not nothing, right?
Sure.
To be more than 10% of the game industry, will be a significant thing. But the important part to notice, though, is it will be the richest, most intense, and most engaging 10 to 25% of the game industry. And we've already seen some verification on this, right? The new Half-Life comes out, and they're like, yeah, forget flat games. We're going to do it in VR because it's just a lot richer of a medium. And so I think we're going to see, more and more of that. So I think that's where VR is going to dominate. It also has potential for education, and it's certainly been used in various industrial purposes for like 30 years. And so it's going to keep being used for that. But it's also going to be a nice, healthy chunk of the entertainment space.
Sure. Well, and I've also seen, or I've had people on the show that are doing VR stuff for rehabilitation for a bunch of different things, whether it's like somebody in prison or somebody that's looking to learn like a new skill or that kind of thing. Like there's a bunch of things that you could do in that as well, right? That are obviously not necessarily like just focused for entertainment, which I think a lot of people also forget about too, right? Is there's a bunch of things that you can do with these technologies that are outside of entertainment. And I'm not saying entertainment isn't important, because I think arguably, and I think some video games make more money than like the biggest blockbusters, right? Like the gaming space is huge, right? And I think, and it's still growing. And I think more and more people, to your point, it's like you want sometimes like to have like this big gaming machine down in your office or gaming room or whatever that you play certain games on. And sometimes you're playing like a mobile game on your phone or your tablet while you're, maybe taking public transit or sitting on the couch, right? So like people play different types of games in different environments, but I think the market is only going to get bigger. And as we add different devices, whether we just hold them or we wear them and they're fully immersive, like the future is kind of, I think like we're maybe not at the beginning, but we're only maybe halfway through or whatever that is to what gaming can and will be in the future.
Oh yeah, no, there's so much more coming. I mean, I think the VR headsets are going to start to become normal. It'll be interesting to see like how things go with AR headsets. They're going to be a lot slower particularly in becoming part of the entertainment world. They're going to be a lot slower. And then the other big change that's coming is going to be the AI change. Yeah. Once we start to have characters that can actually act in a somewhat realistic way and have a meaningful conversation, that's going to have such a big change in the way that video games work. Because right now, video games are there's a real primitive quality to them.
Sure.
When we sometimes talk about the difference between games and movies is if you look at the verbs that happen in games and versus movies, games and movies both have a lot of physical things, jumping, running, shooting. Those are all things that happen in both of them. But movies have a lot more talking, persuading, flirting, things that just don't work well in games. So we often say things that are below the neck, games are really good at that. Stuff that's above the neck, games are really struggle with it. And once AI crosses the boundary and starts to have characters that can do these things, talk and persuade and all of that, like you're going to start to have drama in a way that we haven't seen before, right? We're going to have stories that are so much more interesting and much more touching than movies and film have been able to get near. So I think that's one of the big changes. And I don't expect to see that too much in the 2020s, but I think for the 2030s, that's going to be a big focus of like what's new in gaming. It's going to be these intelligent characters is going to be there.
Why do you think it's so far out? Just the technology's not there yet?
Well, it's a combination of things. So AI tends to be slow.
Okay.
It's just how it is.
Yeah.
And so part of it is the technology's not there. But even once you get the technology there, then you have to figure out how to use it artfully.
Right.
And that's going to take people some time to figure out how to get that working artfully. I mean, it still kills me how incredibly primitive things like Siri and Alexa actually are.
Yeah.
It's almost, I don't mean to insult the teams working on those, but it's almost like the people working on them aren't aware of how human conversation actually works. right?
Yeah,
Because I compare and contrast those systems. Like there was this thing that came out from Motorola, like, I don't know, 20 years ago, that was so much better than what these guys have right now. And only better in its limited context. It was built into some of their phones, and it was a voice system for dialing your phone. And it actually understood the rhythm of conversation.
Interesting.
So, you would say, dial Bob, and it would say, oh, okay, I can dial Bob, but do you mean dial Bob Jones, or do you mean dial Bob Smith?
Right.
And you'd say dial Bob Smith, and it's like, oh, okay, Bob Smith. Hey, cell phone or landline? And you'd say cell phone. And if it understood everything and it felt good about it, it wouldn't say anything and it would just dial. But if it was a little unsure, it would say, okay, dialing Bob Smith on his cell phone. Is that right? And you'd say, yeah. And then it would just do it. And it was just so rhythmic, just the way we interact with each other. And right now computers can't. They just don't do that.
Sure.
But I think by the 2030s, we'll be crossing that boundary.
Interesting. Jesse, sadly, we're out of time, but how about we close with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself, Schell Games, the book, and anything else you want to mention?
Yeah, sure. It's easy to get information about me and my stuff. Just go to jesseschell.com. That's JESSESCHELL.com. And there's links to the stuff I'm doing at Carnegie Mellon, the stuff that's happening at Schell Games, information about the book, and I give a lot of talks and things. There's links to those. You can find all of that right there.
Perfect. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day, man.
All right. Thanks. Great talking to you.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening. Please visit our website at buildingthefutureshow.com to join the free community, sign up for our newsletter, or to sponsor the show. The music is done by Electric Mantra. You can check him out at electricmantra.com and keep building the future.